It's the Battle of the Nine Armies. Hello, welcome to Genesis 14. This is the third paragraph in the fourth episode of the stories of Abram, and we're reviewing our Hebrew just by working our way through the stories of the patriarchs in Genesis. Let's dive in. Vayetze Melech Sodom. So in the previous paragraph, Kedorlaomer and the guys with him were the subject of the verbs throughout that. And so even though this starts with a preterite, not with a noun first clause or with vayihi or something like that, we are switching our subjects. And so we have a new paragraph. Vayetze, I see the vav patak dagesh telling me it's preterite, and the dagesh goes in the prefix yod, so 3ms, which leaves a couple questions for us. One is, what's the root? Yeah, the root is yatzah. What happened to that first yod? Yeah, well, it's part of the tsere underneath the yod that we do see, which is the prefix. So in the kal, for the imperfect, jussive, and preterite forms, we're trying to have the first radical join the prefix, be pretonic, closed, and short, and the prefix has an E-class vowel, typically hirik. Here, because the first radical was yod, and trying to close that syllable, like yod over silent shavah, that yod becomes part of the vowel that precedes, and now it's open and long. So, Vayetze Melech Sodom, so the king of Sodom went out. And then it says, Umelech Amorah, and the king of Gomorrah. Umelech Adma, and the king of Adma. Umelech Zeboyim, and the king of Zeboyim. Umelech Bela, he Tzoar, and the king of Bela, i.e. Tzoar, went out. So our form of the verb is 3ms, but we got an awful lot of subjects here, and it probably includes their armies too. So when we have these compound subjects, it could be a plural verb, but sometimes the verb simply agrees with the first listed subject. So we've got these 5 kings that are going out. Vaya'araku. Let's take a look at that verb. And what's at the end? We've got the u, and whenever it's not a pronominal suffix, we've got a plural verb of some sort. And at the beginning, we have our preterite vav patak dagesh, and the dagesh is in yod, so that's the prefix, yod and u, third masculine plural. If you're not familiar with this root, arak means to arrange. You would see this in, say, worship contexts when you're going to arrange the wood on the altar. But here we're talking about arranging the soldiers for battle. So, vaya'araku etam milchama. So they arranged them, we'll say themselves, and then we have milchama, which is an adverbial accusative, and we'll use a preposition for battle. Remember, you can see the root in there. You have lamed, chet, and mem. You know that as the noun lachem, which is bread, and as the verb lacham, which will occur in the nifal, meaning to fight. Here it is a noun. The mem on the front is like a noun maker. In our textbook, we call that the ATM rule, because you can use a mem, a tav, and on rare occasions an aleph to create a noun out of a root. And the way we usually remember those is to say food fight, because you've got lechem for food and lacham for fight, battle, to do battle. When we're looking at ya'araku, though, what's the stem? We didn't identify that when we went through it. We've got a patak under the yod, which normally is like a hifil if we don't have anything goofy going on. But we do have something goofy going on because the ayin also has a patak. It's not that often that we see the prefix and the first vowel, the prefix and the first radical having a full vowel there. So what gives? There were actually 2 steps. So ayin being a guttural, it wants an A-class vowel even if we have a kal. And ayin being a guttural is not always happy taking a silent shavah in order to close that syllable. So first that ayin says, well look, I want to have a composite shavah. And the community says, okay, that's fine. You can have a composite shavah. So it's got a chataf patak there. But then the second radical, that reish, is with a vocal shavah. And that triggers the chataf vowel to become a full vowel. And so instead of chataf patak, already an upgrade from vocal shavah, already an upgrade from shavah, we have upgraded yet again to a full patak. So the form looks kind of like a hifil, but we've only got one direct object. Hifils would always add another direct object, and this is indeed a cow. So they arrange themselves for battle, Be'emek Hasidim, in the Siddim Valley. Et Kedor LaOmer Melech Elam, Vatidal Melech Goyim, Va'amrafel Melech Shinar, Va'aryok Melech Elasar. So against these other kings, and then we have the note that makes it the Battle of the Nine Armies in 9e, Arba'a Melachim et HaChemisha. So 4 kings against 5. Then we have a parenthetic note, Ve'emech Hasidim Be'erot Chemar. So we see there's a text critical note, and when we see Be'erot followed by Be'erot, maybe we're wondering right off, well, maybe we just have ditography, a repetition of the same word back to back. Maybe that's what our note is going to be about. But that's not what our note is going to be about, because the letter for the note follows more often than not. I guess sometimes it precedes, but it would have been down here if it was about that. When we look at the note, we have sik el mult mus id has. All right, so let's untangle that a little bit. The first part, up to the comma, is sik el. So when we check our guide to the Latin abbreviation, sik means thus. Thus, the Leningrad Codex. This is what the Leningrad text has. But mult mus ed. Many manuscripts and editions, as collected by Kennicott, Derasi, and Ginsburg, all being medieval manuscripts, have instead, and they only give us the part that matters because they're trying to save space. So they've got the hey and the patak, and then the scene, and now there's a dagesh in the scene, and then they just have the little mark there to say all the rest after that is the same. So we're talking about this word Hasidim, and the issue is the correct form of the article. The article should be hey patak dagesh. There's no reason for a scene over a chirik to get rid of the dagesh. A scribe simply forgot to put it in. And so we're being advised that there's manuscript evidence for reading the dagesh there. Okay, so we have then this comment, the Siddim Valley was pits, that is, pits of tar. And so it's appropriate in this parenthetical remark to repeat that word. I suppose they could have said it without, but we don't have manuscript evidence to suggest that we should remove one of the words pits. Then we have Vayanusu Melech Sodom Va'amorah. So Vayanusu, we can see in the middle of that nous. That would be the infinitive construct with a full shurik there. The vav here is dropped out because in jussives and preterites, R2 vav is generally not present as a mater, but we've got the same vowel class. So nous is to flee, right? If you see a nous, you want to run away. So Vayanusu, they fled. Now, who is it that fled? Melech Sodom or Va'amorah. And there we've got another text critical note. So let's take a look at that. This one says, LC mus squiggle g s melech right? So, blue. Let's pull that apart. The L and the C are short for lega cum, read with. MS, it's not MSS, so it's not like there's a whole bunch of manuscripts, but we at least have at least one or a few, and this is Hebrew manuscripts collected by Kennicott, Derasi, and Ginsburg. It's not now talking about manuscripts of the following witnesses that are listed there. And those witnesses are, right, the squiggle, the slinky on its side looking thing is the Samaritan Pentateuch. Then we have the Gothic G for the LXX, the Greek translation. Then we have the Gothic S for the Syriac Peshitta. And then we're told what all of those witnesses point toward as a reading for the Hebrew text. and that is Umelech, and then it gives us Ayin, and that Ayin is referring to Amorah, Gomorrah. And so the significance of the note is to say there's a whole bunch of witnesses that have the word for king in between the conjunction Vav and the word Gomorrah. So, and that is most likely correct. Perhaps the scribe looked at it and is thinking, oh, I've got the king of Sodom and I've got the king of Gomorrah. And as he goes back and forth, he's omitted a Melech. So the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah, those are the two kings that make up the plural for the verb, they fled. Then we have Vayipalu Shama. So Vayipalu is missing a root letter. When we're missing a root letter, it's going to be a Vav or Yod somewhere, usually Yod for R1, Vav or Yod for R2, or phony Hey for R3 that was originally a Yod, or a geminate root, or a Nun, generally in first position. This one would be which of those? Right, this is from Nafal. So the Dagesh Forte in that Pei is the first radical Nun because it was over top of silent Shiva, doing the classic thing that Cal imperfects and preterites do. The first radical joins the prefix, pretonic closed short. The prefix has an E-class vowel, Hirik. So they fell, and then Shama. Well, Sham means there, and then the Kametz Hey is the directional Hey. They fell toward there. A lot of translations will say they fell into them, being a reference back to the pits, apparently. It's kind of a difficult way to take it, because if they're going to fall into them, you would think you would get the preposition bet and then pronominal suffix 3fp, since pits is a feminine plural noun. Or if this was the location that they died in battle, right? They fell in battle. We wouldn't expect the directional hey. So both of those feel a little odd. And another possibility that also feels odd, nafal doesn't always mean fall. Like if you dismount from your horse, that's nafal, you got down from, but it doesn't mean you went splat when you got down from the horse. So one wonders if the king of Sodom and Gomorrah fled and they went down to that area where there were pits to hide out, because we're going to find the king of Sodom in a couple of paragraphs just fine and dandy, greeting Abram and telling him thanks for taking care of things. So perhaps they fell into the pits, but maybe they just hid out there. They laid low. They got down to there. However, V'hanish Arim. Well, let's parse that. What's at the end of that? Well, we have im, and that's a noun ending. It's a masculine plural noun ending. So if this were a verb with a noun ending, it would have to be a participle. Well, let's look at the front. Well, we've got vav, conjunction vav. Then we see hey patak dagesh. That's the article. Articles can go on participles. That's the only verb form they can go on. And then you're looking at nishar. So usually we want three radicals. And that would be, and we would start at the end. So we would have the shin, the aleph, and the resh as our three radicals. And then the nun is something extra on front. Yeah, and that would be the nifal's nun. And the nifal makes its participles by having nun on the front. Whereas, PLs and hifils and all those related things make their participles with mem on the front. So sha'ar, that's actually one of our vocabulary words, to be left over, to remain. So the king of Sodom and the king of Gomorrah, maybe they went down to the tar pit area to hide or something. And then the rest of the army, then we have Hera, to the hill country, maybe, Nasu, they fled. And we don't have a preterite here because this is not advancing the timeline. While the kings fled this way, the rest of the people fled that way. And so we can use this variation from doing preterite, preterite, preterite in order to ensure that the audience knows that this is not a successive thing, that it's same time as. Not all preterites are successive to the one before. We're not going to go into all of that now. But when you really want to mark that this one is happening at the same time, or this action is happening at the same time as an earlier preterite, this is a great way to do it. Put something other than the verb first, and then you can have your perfect verb going along. But let's look at this text critical note as well. It tells us that the Samaritan Pentateuch has 2 heys on the front, and then we have to decide how to parse that out. So we would have hey, hey, resh, hey. The first hey would be the article. The hey with the resh in the middle would be the noun har, the hill country, and then the kametz hey at the end would be directional hey. So the kings fled wherever. Meanwhile, the rest of the people fled to the hill country. Then the next paragraph is going to shift the subject of the verb, because it's now going to be talking about the kings who won the battle rather than the kings who lost the battle. And either way, hopefully we are winning the battle of reviewing our Hebrew. See you next time.